Live from the Bob Levy Broadcast Center, overlooking the Toms River, it's time to get up, get out, do something. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Be a part of the show, 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Good morning and welcome back. Thanks for sharing your morning with us. I'm Ken Malagier in for Jeremy Grunin. You are listening to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin, streaming live at WOBMAM.com, 1160 and 1310 on your AM radio dial. And at the Radio Pup app at 1160 News Talk Radio, we are broadcasting from the beautiful Town Square Media Tower in downtown Toms River this morning. Your current temperature is just about 60 degrees, getting up to a local high of just around 70. Join our conversation this morning at 732-505-1160. I'm very pleased this morning that Lisa Sue Woititz, author of Unwelcome Inheritance, Break Your Family Cycle of Addictive Behaviors, is with us today in studio. In this book, Lisa credits her mother, posthumously the famed Jan Woititz, who spawned a movement and gave people a name for who they were and what they were feeling, adult children of alcoholics. Jan was a Montclair therapist who came up with the term after surviving the damage wrought by her own alcoholic marriage. Having failed to find help for her 3 children, she went out and invented that help herself. Lisa carries on her mother's legacy in this book, as well as an active blog, self-help, and organized therapy sessions. I'm very pleased that this and more brings Lisa Sue into our studio today. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning.
We are so pleased to have you with us. So please let our listening audience know, how would you best describe your book, your current book?
Well, my book, Unwelcome Inheritance, like you said, is building on my mother's work. And what she and I were talking a lot about before she passed away was how adult children of alcoholics that were familiar with her work were getting stuck at some place in their process of recovering from their childhood experience and really not moving forward and getting back together with the family and feeling better about themselves. And so my book is hopefully going to help people break through that.
Excellent. So more of a continuation, really, a tribute to that work.
Yes, it's a tribute to her, and it's also sort of a push forward for our people.
Sure. Is this book then for only those who have suffered the affliction of a parent who they themselves have suffered with addiction, or do you feel that everyone can really benefit from an understanding of what you've put forward here?
Well, we saw a long time ago and continue to see that so many people from so many different sorts of background relate to this, whether it's a problem with addiction to alcohol or drugs or gambling, or some people might say religion. Mm-hmm. All sorts of people from all walks of life do relate to it. So it's helping
because addiction
more than we expected.
Is across the board. To your point, it's when we say addiction, a lot of times we feel or think immediately drugs or alcohol. Right. But addiction could, and growing up in a home where addiction is present, could be anything.
It could be anything, and really it speaks to the level of tension that we grew up with, for one thing. So the dynamics are similar across the board into so many different situations.
And so you find in your therapy and in your practice that that there are similarities in those that have suffered and those that grow up in that environment.
Very much so, because what happens is we take our childhood experience into all the different areas of our lives as adults because we haven't resolved what's going on with us.
So then without resolving it, how likely, and forgive me if you don't have the number off the top of your head, but how likely is someone who grew up in fill-in-the-blank addictive home likely to become an addict themselves?
It's very common. I'm not a numbers person per se, but so many times what happens is people that grew up with an addicted parent develop addictions themselves, not only because of what their role models have shown them how to cope or just a certain lifestyle, but we're born with this body chemistry that is very inviting to that. It's a very highly allergic body chemistry, and so it works both ways.
And the addictions then, if I could presume, need not be the same. So if your parents suffered from addiction A, you may just have an addictive, quote unquote, personality, and your addiction could develop into something completely different, but addiction nonetheless.
It could. And for example, I'll use myself for an example. Because of the way that I grew up, I was determined not to become an alcoholic. So I did all sorts of other things. In my case, and I did eventually develop that problem, but I also have a serious addiction to sugar. And addiction is just another face of alcoholism. It's that same body chemistry. It's a body chemistry that can't process sugar.
Wow.
So
that's remarkable. I love the quote in reading some of your work. People who grew up in an alcoholic home have issues, but they're not broken.
Right.
Can you explain that for our listeners?
That's the heart of my message in Unwelcome Inheritance. And the reason why I say that is because, well, many years ago, and still today, if you go to many of the groups for adult children of alcoholics that have grown because of this movement, you'll hear people talk about being a child of an alcoholic as though it's an addiction itself. And it's not. It's a fact of our history. And it's something that we can grow past with the right help. So we're not broken, and that's when I say I want to push people to decide that they're not broken and that they're going to move forward and repair things in their lives and move forward into getting comfortable with having a productive, happy, comfortable life instead of spending more time in that very uncomfortable, stressful place that we're so used to.
Right, and really moving forward. When we're not speaking about your book specifically, do your practice, do you cover addiction across the board, or do you specialize in adult children of alcoholics?
I do both. I like to I like to speak to adult children of alcoholics and people who identify with that, because I can really appreciate the impact that affects the next generation. So, for example, as a parent, I have fallen short in certain ways because of the way that I grew up. And so that's my message, is to help people get to that place. What was the other part of your question?
Just whether or not your practice had focused on that, or if you do have other types of therapy that you do offer.
Well, first of all, I'm not a therapist.
Thank you for that correction.
I consider myself to be an educator. I love to educate people about this subject, and I'm a coach. I coach people that are in recovery or people that are stuck in their recovery, and I also work with people that have eating disorders.
Okay.
So,
all right.
And the difference between therapy and coaching is that therapy predominantly focuses on untangling that mess of the past, to put it briefly, and that's sort of my editorial, and that's necessary in many cases. But what coaching does is empower people to move into the future, and
give them the tools.
That's really
to succeed.
yes. So that's really more in alignment with what I want to teach.
Excellent. We have so much more coming up when we come back with Lisa Sue Woititz. Of course, more information at lisasuewoititz.com is available for you. Her blog is there. And, of course, some excerpts from her tremendous book. She is the author of Unwelcome Inheritance, Break Your Family's Cycle of Addictive Behaviors. We'll be back after this short break.
Everything you need to know about the Jersey Shore. This is Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.
Good morning, and thanks again for sharing your morning with us. I'm Ken Malagier, in for Jeremy Grunin. You are listening to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin, streaming live at WOBMAM.com, 1160 and 1310, on your radio AM dial, and live on the Radio Pup app at 1160 News Talk Radio. We are broadcasting from the beautiful Town Square Media Tower in downtown Toms River this morning, and I am so pleased to have author Lisa Woititz in with me this morning. And Lisa, recently you've blogged about 5 things adult children of alcoholics can do to boost their recovery. Correct. And I thought it was a really well-written blog and got right to the point. The first is look at the big picture.
Yes. Look at the big picture. I think as humans, we tend to sort of live in a vacuum, thinking about our problems in our lives, our situation. And what I'm hoping that people will be compelled to do is to see yourselves, as I see myself, as part of a bigger picture.
Right.
And my mom and I talked about looking at our family in terms of at least 3 generations, so that we can really understand where we came from and how we came to be who we are. And it's usually quite fascinating.
Sure.
So that's what I mean by looking at the big picture, that it's not just about us. It's about a story that began probably long before we ever got here. And in that context, some of the things make sense. For example, looking at my family, I can understand how, my father developed the problem that he had. In fact, I'd kind of rather be me than him. And so it's enlightening,
right,
and humbling, and also just puts everything in a context that makes it easier to look at.
Sure. And that the breadth of the years often gives clarity.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Recognizing your own importance, you mentioned.
Yes. So in Unwelcome Inheritance, I talk about how we are the catalyst for change. And every person can be a bridge between the generations of their family or other people in their family. Just as though, I was thinking about this before I walked in, they used to say that every alcoholic, or fill in the blank, affects X amount of people in their lives, whether it's their family, people at work, et cetera, et cetera. And it works the other way, too. We can affect people in a positive direction as well. And so I try to be an example of the positive things in my life and have a positive effect on the people around me.
Sure.
And in making peace, I guess is one way of putting it, but in coming to terms with where I've been and coming to love and accept the people in my life that I may have resented for so long, in doing that, I am expanding, relationships and being an example for my children. One of the things that I talk about also is how if I had not allowed my relationship with my dad to blossom, then my children, for example, wouldn't have a relationship with their grandfather. Think about that going forward into the future generations of my family.
How that continues to affect.
Exactly. So do I want to perpetuate that? That's a lot of power that I have to cut off generations of my family from one another going forward. That means that my children's children, they're going to lose their story, or it will be a story of resentment.
Not full.
Right. So I prefer to live the opposite of that and to empower other people to do the same.
That's beautiful. And of course, in brief, 30 seconds, and then we'll get on to the next 2 in our next segment. But change the things we can. We hear that a lot in this world.
Right.
And you mention it in your book, change the things we can.
Yes. So I've always lived by the Serenity Prayer, which so many people know. I see you're nodding your head. It was hanging up in every room that of my childhood home, and I have it in a frame or somewhere all over. And what the prayer talks about is, understanding the things that we have the power to change and the things that we don't have the power to change, and knowing the difference. And I feel that if we can change something, we really should go for it.
Beautiful. We'll be back more with Lisa Sue Woititz after this.
The news never stops at WOBMAM.com. Get the latest from WOBM News, the Town Square, New Jersey News Network, and Fox News Radio. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. News Talk Radio, WOBMAM 1160 and 1310.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm Ken Malagier in for Jeremy Grunin. You are listening to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin, streaming live at WOBMAM.com, 1160 and 1310 on your radio AM dial, and live on the Radio Pup app at 1160 News Talk Radio. Join our conversation this morning at 732-505-1160. It is my great pleasure to have Lisa Sue Woititz in with me this morning. We were just discussing one of Lisa's blogs, 5 things adult children of alcoholics can do their best to boost their recovery. And we were just going to discuss service to others.
Service to others. Well, it takes us out of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I've never been in a situation in my life where there hasn't been that moment where I realize that there's somebody having a harder time than I am.
Mm.
And so I think that when we do service, we see that firsthand, and it's really important because it makes us grateful for what we have. Certainly. And it also shows us that we can be there for other people and make a change in their lives.
And this can be any service. This is
anything. Open the door for somebody,
right.
Or work in a soup kitchen, whatever it is. It's putting other people before ourselves.
Right.
So
right. And remember to be grateful.
Remember to be grateful, because that's a state of mind. And I can focus on my problems. I can focus on all the terrible things that have happened to me, and I will never want to get out of bed in the morning.
Right.
But if I can think about all the positive things that I'm grateful for, it's just a whole other way to look at my life and the world. And, positive state of mind affects everything.
Yeah. Each and everything that we do in each of our daily lives. And of these 5 things, and if you're just joining us, it was look at the big picture, recognize your own importance, change the things we can, service to others, and remember to be grateful. These are all 5 things adult children of alcoholics can do to boost their recovery. Are these in order, Lisa, or would you classify any one of these hurdles or challenges in recovery more difficult than the other to accomplish?
I wouldn't say that. I would say they're all equally important, but in the bigger picture, I feel that when we grow up in a certain way, we tend toward seeing the glass half empty instead of half full. It's just a tendency that is natural. So it's not something to judge. It's not something we always have control over. And I think also because of that body chemistry, people might tend toward depression.
Mm.
So I feel that, move a muscle, change a thought.
Sure.
These are things that even though I know them, I forget them every day. So I'm just putting them out there as reminders, because it's these small things. I mean, I'll be in the middle of my day feeling really down and stop to think for a minute and realize, you know what? Everything's pretty cool, actually. Okay, I'll feel good.
Right.
We really do have more choice over how we feel than we realize.
And how we feel, and I think a lot of people listening can certainly see how this could translate into their own daily lives, whether or not they're an adult child of an alcoholic or just a person going through life and work, and how that your personal daily attitude affects everyone around you.
Right. And I feel that we have to be particularly careful because we do have these tendencies. And it makes sense if you think about it, because if you grow up in an atmosphere that's full of tension and you never know what kind of problem you're going to walk into when you go home, and you're pretty sad because your family is unhappy and maybe you're embarrassed, and it's tough. Mm-hmm. And so when we're not living in that situation anymore, it's difficult to switch gears.
Right.
And sometimes people never are able to do that.
Mm.
So.
Well, this breadth of work is a beautiful tribute to your mother. And of course, when you were just graduated high school, I believe it was 1983,
right.
Your mother had actually coined the phrase adult children of alcoholics.
Right.
And did you know at the time, or did you have a feeling at the time that phrase or your mother's work would actually shape the rest of your professional life?
No. In fact, my mother's work started when she was empowering herself to leave her marriage to my father, because she was, back in those days, a lot of women didn't work, and they were dependent upon their husband. And of course, there are just as many women alcoholics as there are men. But in this specific situation, my mother needed to empower herself to have choices in her life. And at the same time, she was looking at my brothers and I and worried because even though she was in this difficult situation with us, she had enough clarity to see what was happening to us. And she was worried about how this was going to affect us in the rest of our lives. And so when she went back to school to become a therapist, she started to research this topic and found out that her concerns were really true and valid, and started writing about it and was published. And Adult Children of Alcoholics, actually, her bestseller became a bestseller strictly really through word of mouth. The publisher, Health Communications down in Florida, was really not known. They were just two...
Small publishing house?
It was a small publishing house. Really, it was just a little warehouse in Pompano Beach, Florida. And they took a chance on her, and she took a chance on them. And really, by word of mouth, there was not a lot of money for advertising or anything like that. Right. And boom, by 1987, it was all over the place.
Wow, tremendous. So, and still selling. Almost
selling.
10,000 copies a year.
It's a problem that's not going away.
Right.
And it's a problem that's growing. So the need is always there. And the resources are more than they were in some respects. But in my view, I don't think that the help is keeping up with the problem.
Wow. Wow. And do you now you are a mother of 3 beautiful children.
I am.
And here at the Jersey Shore, and you also spent some time in New York State.
I do. I'm a Jersey girl.
But you are a Jersey girl.
I'm a Jersey girl.
And do you encourage this in your own family to read about and understand where you've come from and your history? And
Definitely.
How do you speak to your children about that?
Well, I certainly made my share of mistakes. I certainly was able to write about the sections in parenting, and I speak to a lot of parents because I've spoken to a lot of other people and observed a lot of other situations in my work, but also because I've made every mistake a person can make. And I can see that in myself, and I can be honest about it. And I've spoken to my kids about these things, and they understand it. They've read my book. My daughter especially, she read cover to cover. And so we're on the same page, I think.
And certainly more on parenting when we come back. We want to touch on certainly the epidemic in our community and get Lisa's certainly input and advice on how we can move forward positively. When we come back with Wake Up with Jeremy Grennan, Ken Malagier in for Jeremy Grennan. We'll see you after this short break.
The Sean Hannity Show, this afternoon at 3. Wake Up with Jeremy Grennan returns next. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.
Good morning, and thanks for sharing your morning with us. I'm Ken Malagier, local small business owner, in for Jeremy Grennan. You are listening to Wake Up with Jeremy Grennan, streaming live at WOBMAM.com, 1160 and 1310 on your radio AM dial, and live on the Radio Pup app at 1160 News Talk Radio. So happy this morning to have with us Lisa Sue Woititz, author of An Unwelcome Inheritance, Break Your Family Cycle of Addictive Behaviors. And Lisa, faced with the current epidemic in our community that I think it's fair to say certainly gets the most press of late, the heroin and opiate addiction crisis, how is dealing with this different, if at all, for the families of those affected than the treatment or therapy or coaching needed for adult children of alcoholics?
Well, what happens for us is that as parents, we are not recognizing the problem soon enough. We come from an environment that is very filled with tension, and we live crisis to crisis. So we're great crisis managers, but as far as daily living and handling situations as they arise, that doesn't really happen for us. Problems register for us usually when they're at the crisis level, because that's what we're used to and that's where we're so effective. So that's one very big problem.
Right.
Because especially with the drugs that are out there now, by the time we recognize that there's a problem, we might be at a funeral.
Right.
So
how do we empower parents to take either a sooner accounting for the issue, if that's how we can say it? I don't want to put the onus certainly on the families, but
right, of course not.
How can we be more effective? What types of coaching or support can you offer if somebody's reaching out or someone recognizes that there is this problem that exists in their family?
Well, I'll use myself as an example. I know with my kids, because of the way that I grew up, I avoided confrontation at all costs. And that included confronting my children. If I saw or I had a gut feeling that there was a problem, I would justify it, explain it, do whatever I needed to do, rather than confront it. And so that's really one of the biggest areas that I work on with people, is to recognize whether we're doing that or not, whether that's part of the problem, and to make sure that people know if you have a gut instinct about something, you're right.
It's probably
you're
right.
I mean, I'll be so bold as to say you are right, because that's coming from somewhere. That's not a normal feeling. If you have that nagging message, that nagging feeling that something is off, or you find yourself noticing your kid doing something, you're right. Just go with that.
Right.
Don't be, because the worst thing that could happen is the best thing that could happen, which is that you would be wrong and everything is fine.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure. Sure. And what would you suggest that these parents do in terms of methodology? What is the best way of confronting that you've found in your experience? Perhaps is it an outright confrontation with someone in your family? Is it an intervention with a group, or how would you recommend people making a start? Let's say that they have this nagging suspicion and they're a listener, because this is a real problem in our community.
Definitely.
So I'm sure there are listeners out there who are facing this today.
Who are facing
this morning,
today.
6:51 a.m.
Right.
What's your best advice?
My best advice is talk to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to them. And you know, we say confrontation, confronting the problem. That suggests
a fight. But
that
it's
suggests
not
that no,
necessarily. Right.
It's a conversation. I'm worried about you.
Right.
This is what happened. Can we talk about it? So many times, and I'm guilty of this too, we lecture, we talk down, and one of the biggest mistakes I made is that I was hoping that my experience would somehow prevent my kids from going through the same things I did and doing the same things I did. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
We have to learn for ourselves. For some reason, we just have to go through that experience ourselves. I remember telling my mom, and in doing research for her, that the feedback that we got from kids was saying, talk to us, and talk to us as if we're adults, because we're not stupid, we're not incompetent,
right?
And I think that they appreciate that a lot.
To continue this conversation, Lisa, how can someone get a hold of you?
Well, my website is lisasuewoititz.com. I'm also on Facebook, Lisa Sue Woititz, Adult Children of Alcoholics, and I'm on Twitter and I'm on Facebook. And if you get in touch with me through either of those ways, I will answer you as quickly as I can.
This has been a tremendous morning. Lisa, thank you so very much for joining us. That's Lisa Sue Woititz, WOITITZ.com. We'll be back after this.